honor of the appearance day of Lord Ramachandra coming very soon, decided to begin reading from Krishna Dharma's Ramayana, and we're going to start with the prologue, which is very interesting. He's a very, very good writer. He explains in the introduction, primarily, not exclusively, he's followed Valmiki Ramayana, but he includes some of the other authentic Ramayanas. So it's a little bit mix. And we're going to hear about Ravana this evening. Coursing through the sky in his celestial chariot, Ravana appeared like a blazing comet. His dark body shone with a brilliant aura. From his 10 heads, his reddish eyes darted about, scouring the mountain below. His 20 powerful arms, hanging from his huge frame, looked like 5-hooded serpents. Seated on a throne of gems, he directed his golden chariot by thought alone, and it moved swiftly over the Himalayan range. That's a good introductory paragraph. I mean, for writers, that's the first sentence. He's a good writer. Paragraph. The demon was out on his conquests. All around him flew thousands of Rakshasas, clutching swords, barbed spears, spiked maces, and iron bludgeons. All of those weapons smeared with blood. Some Rakshasas had the heads of tigers, some of donkeys, and some of fierce fiends. Others appeared in their natural forms, large blackish bodies, fearful faces with tall pointed ears, and rows of sharp fangs with a mass of red hair on their heads. They wore iron breastplates studded with gems and were adorned with bright gold earrings and other shining ornaments. Surrounding Ravana, they looked like dark clouds with lightning covering the sun. Ravana wished to defeat in battle even the gods themselves. Wanting to establish his supreme power in the universe, he had gone to the higher planets and conquered hosts of Gandharvas and Yakshas, powerful celestial fighters. Now he was returning from his victorious fight with Kuvera, his other brother, and the treasurer of the gods. That lordly deity had been made to retreat by Ravana, losing to the demon his wonderful chariot, known in all the worlds as Pushpaka. The fearless Ravana, overlord of all the demons, looked down from the Pushpaka at the forests below. It was a picture of tranquility. Among the trees were many verdant clearings, covered with various wild shrubs and forest flowers. Crystal waterfalls cascaded onto many colored rocks. Lakes filled with lotuses and swans shone from the mountain plateaus as the horde of Rakshasas soared overhead. Sometimes the demons would see groups of rishis, ascetic Brahmins who dwelt in those high mountain ranges, practicing austerities and worshipping the gods. They would see the columns of smoke rising up amongst the trees from the sacrificial fires tended by the sages, using their powers of sorcery. The Rakshasas dropped down volumes of blood, feces, and urine, defiling the sacrifices. They would hurl huge boulders and blazing coals, crushing and burning the sages, where they sat in meditation. Finally, the demons would themselves descend, howling and roaring. They tore apart the bodies of the rishis, drinking their blood and devouring their flesh. Yeah. Ravana admired the Pushpaka as it proceeded according to his will. His brother Kuvera would be sorry to lose such a splendid vehicle. It looked more like a city of the gods floating in the air than a chariot. Numerous cat's eyes and crystal pillars ran along its sides, supporting golden mansions inlaid with coral. Large floors made entirely of gems stood upon golden statues of ponds crowded with white lotuses. Pretty fancy vehicle. In those ponds stood ivory elephants and silver goddesses. Networks of pearls and wreaths of celestial flowers hung all over the car. It was encrusted with countless precious stones and emblazoned with gold carvings of bull sharks and fierce bears. Sweeping through the skies, it emitted the sounds of celestial music and the fragrance of the parijata flower, known only to the gods. As Ravana sat idly aboard the chariot, gazing around at the magnificent scenery below, he suddenly noticed a lady sitting in meditation. This was most unusual. Women were rarely seen in those mountains. Sometimes the rishis would have their wives with them, but this woman seemed to be entirely alone. Ravana slowed the chariot and moved down to look more closely. Perhaps there were more ascetics nearby. The Rakshasas could use a little entertainment, and if this woman was as beautiful as she seemed at first glance, so could he. Ordering the Rakshasas to wait in the sky, Ravana himself rose up from the chariot and descended to the ground. He saw the young ascetic girl sitting on a flat piece of soft grassland surrounded by wild flowers. She glowed with a golden beauty. Her limbs were exquisitely formed and her full breasts were covered with a black deerskin. Ravana could see the contours of her tapering thighs through the thin cloth covering her crossed legs. Dark locks of thickly matted hair hung down to her waist, framing her white-complexioned face. Her red lips moved slightly as she intoned the sacred syllable Om. Her smooth golden arms were bared in front of her as she sat with folded palms, her long curling lashes covering half-closed eyes. Ravana's mind was overpowered by lust. Who was this youthful lady? What was she doing here in such a lonely place? Did she have a protector? Never mind. He would soon deal with that. The forest was no place for such a maiden. She would make an excellent addition to his other consorts. By his mystic power, Ravana assumed a human form and approached the girl. He spoke loudly, disturbing her reverie. Oh, most beautiful maiden, who are you? Why are you practicing asceticism in this lonely region? To whom do you belong? What fortunate man has you for his wife? The demon was unable to resist the charms of women. As he gazed upon the alluring form of the girl, he was possessed by increasing desire. He laughed and waited for her to reply. The girl fully opened her black eyes and looked at Ravana. Seeing him as a guest in her hermitage, she spoke respectfully, telling him her name. She was Vedavati, the daughter of a powerful sage, who was himself a son of the god's preceptor, Brahaspati. Looking down in shyness, she said, I was born as an incarnation of the holy Vedas. My father was sought by numerous gods and other celestial beings who wish to have my hand in marriage. However, none but Vishnu, the Lord of all the worlds, can be my spouse. Thus I am seated here, absorbed in thought of the Lord and awaiting his favor. There's more to the story, but that's sufficient. Paragraph. Vedavati had meditated for thousands of years. Her body, like that of the gods, neither aged nor required any sustenance. She could understand by her own inner vision who Ravana was and what was his intention. In gentle tones, she said, inconceivable Lord was all powerful and all seeing, and she had chosen him alone. She could not belong to anyone else. Ravana should continue on his way as before. Ravana laughed again. He was not going to leave behind this jewel of a woman. Hearing the name of Vishnu, his sworn enemy, only made him all the more determined. The demon's voice boomed like thunder. Your resolution to practice austerity befits only an old woman, O lady of shapely limbs. Why do you waste your fleeting youth in this way? I am Ravana, lord of the Rakshasas, the very mighty race of demons. Become my wife and live with me in my capital Lanka, the golden city I forcibly seized from the gods. Who is this Vishnu anyway? Ravana spoke derisively of Vishnu, whom he knew to be the Lord of all the gods. The arrogant demon cared nothing for any universal authority. He had been granted boons by Brahma, the creator of the universe, who had so blessed the Rakshasa that he would not be killed by practically any created being, neither god nor demon. Ravana could assume forms at will. Vedavati's mention of Vishnu did not bother him in the least. He stood smiling before the maiden, his eyes full of lust. Hearing Ravana deride Vishnu, Vedavati flared up with anger and rebuked the demon. She told him to leave immediately for his own good, lest he incite the powerful anger of that supreme deity. Ravana smiled. This high-spirited woman would make a perfect consort for him. He stepped forward and grabbed hold of her long locks of hair. Vedavati at once uttered a powerful Sanskrit mantra which momentarily checked the demon's advance. She lifted a hand and by her mystic power cut through her hair. The Rakshasa fell back in surprise as she spoke furiously. O evil one, I shall now quit this body defiled by your touch. As I have been insulted by you, I shall take birth again only for your destruction. Appearing from the earth, I shall become the pious daughter of a virtuous man. You and your entire race will be destroyed as a result of that birth. Vedavati closed her eyes and meditated on Vishnu, seeing him within her heart. Before Ravana's eyes, she invoked fire from within herself. Her body was immediately consumed by flames, and in a few moments Ravana stood looking at her ashes. Baffled by her words, the disappointed demon rose again to his chariot and continued on his way. The demon and his Rakshasa followers spent some time in the Himalaya mountains, wreaking havoc among the many ascetics living there. Gradually, they approached the far northern region where there lay Mount Kailash, the abode of Shiva. As the Pushpaka began crossing that mountain, it was suddenly brought to a halt. Ravana was surprised, and he descended to the ground surrounded by his ministers who accompanied him on the chariot. As he gazed around at the brilliant scenery on the mountainside, he saw a strange being with a monkey's head. Who is that? Let's find out. The creature appeared dreadful, not Hanuman, with a dark, yellowish complexion and misshapen features. Although his body was large, he had a dwarfish stature. He was clean shaven and muscular, and he stood holding a large, glowing pike. Not yet. He comes later. Although his body was large, okay, he had a clean shaven and muscular. And where is this reason? Why have I been impeded? I am Nandi, the servant of Shiva, replied the unusual being. You have arrived at Shiva's abode, which is inaccessible to all created beings. You will not be able to pass this mountain. Therefore, turn back and go the way you have come. Ravana looked at the strange body of Nandi and laughed out loud. He spoke in a derisory voice. Why should I heed you, O monkey-faced one? Who is this Shiva, anyway? Hearing his master insulted, infuriated Nandi, raising his pike, which shot forth tongues of fire, he exclaimed, "O Rakshasa, I should kill you at once, but I will not do so, as you already stand killed by your own sins. But I say this, as you disregard me in my monkey form, there shall be born on earth many monkeys of terrible strength who will annihilate your race." Nandi. Now, Nandi normally is described as being a bull carrier, but apparently he can have different shapes. As Nandi spoke, the sound of heavenly drums reverberated in the sky, and a shower of flowers fell. Ravana's eyes flamed in anger. Disregarding his curse, he roared, "I shall remove this hill from my path. What do I care for you and your master?" That was a mistake. The Rakshasa immediately plunged his 20 massive arms deep into the side of the hill. He began tearing it up, and it slowly rose above the earth, shaking violently as the hill shook. Shiva's consort Parvati slipped from her position and clung to her husband. Shiva reassured her, "Do not be afraid. This is the action of the vain demon Ravana. I shall deal with him shortly. He cannot harm you." Parvati's eyes turned red as she replied to her powerful husband, "As this wretch has frightened a woman by his violence, his death shall be caused by a woman." So there's 3 curses so far. It's not over yet. Shiva stood up and pressed down upon the hill with his toe, Mount Kailash. Ravana at once felt an unbearable pressure. His arms, which resembled huge pillars holding the hill, were crushed. He let out a tremendous cry that resounded throughout the 3 worlds of heaven, earth, and hell. Terrifying all beings, he was trapped by the weight of the mountain and could not move. The Rakshas's ministers at once surrounded him and advised him to appease Shiva. Quote, "We have heard that the all-powerful one is easily pleased. Offer him prayers and seek his compassion at once. Surely he will be gracious to you." Ravana, who had made a study of all the scriptures, began reciting hymns from the Samaveda in glorification of Shiva. But even after 100 years had passed, the Rakshasa still remained trapped. Although in great pain, he continued offering prayers to Shiva. Finally, Shiva relented and relieved Ravana of the pressure. He appeared before the demon and spoke kindly. "O 10-headed one." Actually, his name, Ravana, was given from this incident before it was Dasa Griva. Dasa means 10, and Griva means neck. He had 10 heads and 10 necks. Dasa Griva. That was his name from birth. No, she was going to give him this name, Ravana, one who cries loudly or makes others cry. O 10-headed one, your prayers have pleased me. Do not be so rash again. Leave now and go wherever you like. Ravana bowed to coiled around his blue neck. He gazed at Ravana with his 3 eyes as the demon folded his palms to address him. My lord, if you are actually pleased with me, then please give me your weapon. Shiva smiled. Ravana's lust for battle would prove to be his destruction before long, saying, so be it. Shiva raised his palm in benediction and immediately vanished from that spot. Ravana felt the mantras for invoking Shiva's powerful Pashupata weapon appeared within his mind. He smiled. Who could resist such power? Even he had been able to overcome Shiva. The greatest deity was surely worthy of his worship. Next, Ravana mounted the Pushpaka, which had waited in the sky all the time he was trapped, 100 years. Being unable to proceed further to the north, he turned back southwards, still accompanied by his numerous Rakshasa forces. As he moved across the earth, seeking further martial engagements like battle, he came upon the city of Ayodhya. Ayodhya. This is before Ramachandra's appearance, so it's a predecessor king. There was a capital. This was the capital of the world of humans. The emperor of the earth dwelt there, and Ravana considered him as fit for a fight. If he conquered this king, then the whole earth would be subjugated. Ravana had little interest in human affairs. The Rakshasas were a superior race of beings, more on a level with the gods, but the demon wanted to establish his supremacy over all beings. His army of Rakshasas surrounded the city, challenging the emperor to battle. A fierce battle ensued between the two armies of Ravana and the Ayodhya king. His name? Anaranya. It's important in Ramayana. Anaranya. Tens of thousands of chariots and elephants came onto the battlefield, along with hundreds of thousands of foot soldiers. Showers of arrows, like swarms of black bees, fell upon the demons. Anaranja's army threw lances, darts, steel bullets, and iron maces by the million. They swept towards the enemy, shouting courageously with their weapons raised. Ravana's forces used sorcery to appear and disappear at will, flying in the sky and hurling down rocks and sharp weapons. The king's army replied with showers of swift and deadly arrows, using powerful catapults. The warriors threw at the Rakshasas large iron darts, which whistled through the air. But Anaranya's fighters could not easily engage with the elusive demons. Although they rushed forward, slashing at the enemy with their blue steel swords, the soldiers found themselves cleaving the air as the Rakshasas rose into the sky. The Rakshasas, who towered over their human foes, would then suddenly descend behind the soldiers, cutting them down with razor-sharp scimitars. What's a scimitar? Anyone know? Scimitar. It's a kind of sword, I think. Okay. Gradually, the demons overpowered the king's army. The battlefield became strewn with the mangled bodies of Anaranya's troops. Blood flowed in waves upon the ground, heads rolled on the earth, with their golden earrings flashing and their teeth clenched in fury. Large and well muscled arms, still clinging, still clutching broadswords and lances, lay severed as they hacked down the king's armies. Anaranya himself exhibited great prowess. He knew the secrets of the celestial weapons, and by invoking those divine missiles, he killed innumerable Rakshasas. When the demons hid using their sorcery, he released the Shabda weapon of sound, which found them wherever they were. As hordes of Rakshasas rushed at the emperor, he let go the wind weapon, which lifted the demons and hurled them far away. Anaranya was difficult to look upon as he stood in his chariot, releasing his weapons. They fell upon the Rakshasa forces like blazing meteors, but the demons far outnumbered the humans. Although hard pressed by the king, the Rakshasas responded with more and more sorcery, vanishing into the sky and entering into the earth. Eventually, Ravana's hordes completely annihilated their enemies, and Anaranya stood alone against the demons. Scimitars? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Got that? Seeing all his forces consumed, like so many moths entering a fire, the emperor became infuriated. He went towards Ravana, who stood in a war chariot. As his Rakshasas fought with the soldiers, Anaranya took up his great bow and let loose 800 fierce arrows, which sped like flames of fire toward Ravana. By the incantations of Anaranya, those arrows were imbued with the power of thunderbolts, 800 of them. The king fired them so swiftly that they flew in a long line, almost end to end. They struck Ravana furiously on his head and chest, sounding like claps of thunder, but the demon did not flinch at the least. Angered by the king's sudden attack, Ravana took up a terrible-looking mace. He whirled it above his head, and with a force that glowed bright orange and threw off tongues of fire, he flew with the speed of a tempest towards the emperor and struck him a great blow on the forehead. The king fell from his chariot and lay bleeding on the ground. The Rakshasa began laughing and deriding the fallen monarch. What is the use of fighting with Ravana? There is none who can face me in battle and remain alive. Clearly you are a foolish man, too much addicted to wine and women. Thus you have not heard of my unassailable power. Ravana continued insulting the dying king, mocking his ancestral line, in which the earth's emperors had appeared for thousands of years. Anaranya looked up at the demon with eyes red from anger. Gasping for breath as his life slipped away, he spoke with difficulty. I have not been killed by you, O vile Rakshasa. Death is certain and comes to all beings according to their destiny. None can be killed before their fate decrees, nor can any be saved when their time has arrived. I am thus killed by my own fate. Do not indulge in self-praise, Ravana, for your own death will soon come. The emperor possessed mystic power, gained by his long practice of austerity. He was loath to waste that accumulated power in Ravana, but the demon had to be checked. The dying king could at least do something before he departed. Anaranya fixed his fading gaze on the lord of the Rakshasas, and concentrating his mind, he uttered a curse. Number 4. In the very line that you now deride, O Ravana, there will soon appear a king who will kill you and all your race. There's more coming too. Curses. As Anaranya spoke, the sound of kettle drums was heard, resounding in the sky, and a shower of celestial flowers fell upon him. Heavenly voices were heard to say, "It shall be so." Having delivered his curse, the emperor slumped to the ground, his life spent, his ethereal form glowing like fire. Ravana snorted derisively. Who cared for the curse of some puny being? What human could ever kill him? He only bothered fighting with them by way of sport. Anaranya's curse was simply the insane words of a dying man. It could never come to pass. If any kings dared challenge him, they would meet the same end as this one here. As for the celestial voices, well, he would soon deal with those arrogant deities. The demon again mounted the Pushpaka, which was stationed in the sky. Not being interested in pillaging the paltry wealth of the human city, he left and soared into the heavens. Perhaps there were some gods around who could put up a better fight. Ravana went to the heavenly planets inhabited by the principal gods. But the gods swiftly ran away, unwilling to encounter him in battle. They knew of the inviolable boons of Brahma. It was pointless fighting this demon. The gods prayed to Vishnu, hiding themselves in fear. Ravana decided to rest for a while in heaven. He went to Amaravati, the city of Indra, king of the gods. As the Rakshasa was seated in the celestial Nandana gardens, he saw an Apsara, a heavenly nymph named Rambha. The face of that celestial girl shone with incomparable beauty, and she was adorned with bright garlands and jewels. Her soul, captivating eyes glanced here and there, and her fleshy hips swayed as she moved. Ravana gazed upon her large, round breast and shapely thighs. Her hands, soft like rose petals, pulled her shining blue dress tight around her body as she saw the demon staring at her. Ravana assumed a godly form of great splendor. Concealing his terrible 10-headed body, he sprang to his feet and quickly went over to Rambha, immediately taking her by the hand. Completely overcome by lust, he smiled at the celestial girl. "Where do you go? And whose are you, lovely lady?" he asked. "Who will today enjoy the nectar of your soft, red lips? Who will be blessed by the touch of your tender breasts? Which fortunate man will lie tightly embraced by you, his mind completely captured by carnal delights?" Ravana was not at all concerned whether she was married or not. He had stolen the wives of gods, Gandharvas, and demons everywhere, taking them to Lanka to join his harem. The Rakshasa was accustomed to having his way, and spoke only in an attempt to win over Rambha. He praised her divine beauty, and told her of his own power and glory. What woman would refuse the opportunity to become the consort of the mighty Ravana? But the beautiful girl did not reciprocate his advances. She pulled away from him, her bright bracelets falling to the ground as she wrestled herself from Ravana's grasp. Folding her palms and looking down, she addressed the Rakshasa reproachfully. "Please do not speak in this way. I am as good as your daughter, and I therefore deserve to be protected by you, O Ravana. Indeed, I am the wedded wife of another." Rambha told him that she was married to a god, Nalakuvara, who was the son of Kuvera, Ravana's own brother. She was thus related to Ravana, and he should not make amorous advances towards her. Ravana laughed loudly. He had no regard whatsoever for any moral codes. He moved towards Ramba, who ran behind a golden bush. Ravana pursued her, pulling off his red silk robes and revealing his immense, lustrous body. The maiden tried to evade him, dodging here and there with her garland and necklaces swinging, but it was useless. Taking hold of Ramba, the Rakshasa forcibly laid her across a nearby rock. He snatched off her garments and began ravishing her. His eyes expanded in delight. Ramba cried out for help, but seeing the fierce Rakshasa, no one dared intervene. The demon's powerful hands pinned the white arms of the maiden against the rock. Her dark hair fell in disarray, its golden clasps and flowers dislodged. Ravana violently molested her in front of his demon followers. Although she begged him to desist, the Rakshasa took that struggling heavenly girl against her desire. After Ravana had satiated his lust, he stood up, fastened his waistcloth. Shedding tears, Ramba backed away from the demon and fled. Her clothes torn and her garland crushed, she went before her husband. When he saw her in that condition, Nalakuvara became infuriated. But when he heard it was Ravana who had raped her, he felt helpless. The demon had already defeated Nalakuvara's powerful father, who was supported by innumerable Yakshasa warriors. There was no possibility of facing Ravana in a fight. Nalakuvara considered the situation carefully. Although he could not fight the demon, he could at least curse him as a result of his evil act. The righteous curses of the gods invoked the infallible power of Vishnu. Considering this the only means of punishing Ravana, Nalakuvara touched holy water and then uttered his imprecation or curse. Quote, "This evil Rakshasa has violated a celestial lady. If he ever again rapes another maiden, he will immediately fall dead." Ravana soon heard of that curse. He had seen such curses made by the gods and rishis come to pass many times. Once uttered, they could not be retracted. Though he did not like to accept it, Ravana could understand that some powerful force maintained the universal order and laws. Thinking it possible that Nalakuvara's words might just be effective, he decided not to again force himself upon another female. Better not to take any chances. After all, there were enough women who would willingly accept him. Curse number 5. He's not over yet. Being disappointed that no gods would fight with him, Ravana left the heavenly planets. He began heading for the southern quarter of the universe, where lived the Danavas and Daityas, the most powerful celestial demons. Surely they would afford him battle. Who else was there left for him to conquer? As Ravana flew in the Pushpaka, he suddenly saw ahead of him the celestial Rishi Narada, shining and brightly holding his tambura. The seer plucked the strings gently, singing the praises of Vishnu. Ravana had met him many times before and was pleased to see him. The Rakshasa usually had little time for sages, especially devotees of Vishnu. He preferred to kill and eat them rather than speak with them. The rishis and seers generally favored the gods, but Narada was different. He would often give Ravana good advice and seemed to be his well-wisher. Ravana raised a hand in salute to this sage. The seer came before Ravana and greeted him. Narada could travel freely anywhere in the universe. It was even said that he could leave the material worlds and journey to Vaikuntha, the spiritual abode of the Lord himself, which knows no decay and is free of all suffering. Narada smiled at Ravana. His large eyes were like two shining sapphires. On his head, his coiled golden hair was held in place by a jeweled silver band. Clad in soft skin, of a black renku deer, Narada stood in the air in front of Ravana, who invited him onto the chariot. Sitting cross-legged on a golden seat, the seer began to address him in gentle, pleasing tones. Why are you harassing this world of humans, O valiant one? It is already in the grip of death. These people do not deserve to be attacked by you, Ravana, who cannot be overcome by even the entire heavenly host united together. Why would you destroy people who are racked by numerous anxieties, surrounded by endless calamities, and are subject to old age and hundreds of diseases? Narada told Ravana that everyone in the material world in time would go to the abode of Yamaraj, the great lord of death. There was no need for Ravana to kill them. Death conquers all. Even the gods would eventually succumb to death. If Ravana should conquer Yamaraj, the entire universe would be conquered. The sage knew that Ravana could not overpower Yamaraj. But he wanted to distract the demon from his evil aim of killing more people and overthrowing the gods. He also wanted the Rakshasa to greatly increase his sinful actions of assailing the god of death. Ravana would thus create for himself a karmic destiny which would soon result in his own destruction. He's a good writer, huh? What to speak of Valmiki, but his use of language is good. The demon pondered Narada's suggestion. This sounded interesting. He liked the idea of fighting with the immensely powerful Yamaraj. Perhaps this would be a battle worthy of him, and if death himself were slain, then the whole universal order would be cast into utter chaos. That appealed to Ravana, who wanted to assert himself over any and all powers in the universe. He nodded slowly at Narada, who sat smiling at him. Ravana told the sage he would leave immediately for death's abode. As Narada rose up in the sky, playing upon his tambura, Ravana began heading towards the domain of Yamaraj, the god of injustice. As Ravana approached the ethereal region, known as Yamaloka, he saw everywhere living beings reaping the fruits of their actions. He also saw the millions of soldiers and servants of Yamaraj, known as the Yamadutas. They appeared fierce and unapproachable. Their bodies were powerful but hideously deformed, covered all over with black hairs that stood erect. In their hands they held nooses and terrible weapons. Their faces were contorted and into frightful expressions, and they yelled and shrieked in dissonant tones. Moving swiftly, they struck and tortured people who were running in all directions. Fearful screams and cries resounded everywhere in that dark and desolate place. Ravana saw in hundreds and thousands of people being eaten up by fierce dogs, consumed by fires, or being hurled into vats of boiling oil by the Yamadutas. Other unrighteous men and women were running here and there on burning sands, being pursued by Yamadutas holding lances and tridents. Some were being dragged through trees and leaves like steel razors that shredded their bodies. Howling in terrible pain, they would fall to the ground, but their bodies would again become whole. They would then leap up and race off, only to be quickly caught by the Yamadutas and put through the same suffering again. Ravana witnessed innumerable kinds of punishment being meted out to sinful souls. Searching for Yamaraj, he coursed on rapidly in the Pushpaka. In other parts of that mystical and indescribable region, Ravana saw people enjoying celestial delights by virtue of their own good deeds. It seemed as though they were situated in a separate dimension of space and time. Beautiful heavenly landscapes stretched out into the distance. Large, shining mansions stood next to clear blue lakes. Young men and women with highly attractive forms were dressed in golden garments and ornaments, embracing one another and laughing. Excellent food and drink was laid out on gold and silver tables. Musicians played and young girls danced. Ravana saw countless people intoxicated with pleasure and entirely oblivious to the scenes of suffering elsewhere. Leaving behind that glowing region of happiness, Ravana continued deeply into Yamaloka. He crossed over the broad Vaitarani River, which flowed with blood and excrement, and came to another dark terrain where countless Yamadutas were relentlessly pursuing wicked persons. The terrible cackles of the Yamadutas echoed there, along with the howls of jackals and wolves. Everywhere stood people who appeared emaciated and pale, seized with an unbearable thirst, and crying out for water. Descending from his chariot, Ravana began to beat back the Yamadutas, freeing the people they were punishing. He felt no compassion for the pain for others, but he calculated that by oppressing the Yamadutas, he would cause Yamaraj to appear. As the demon freed many thousands of wretched persons from their tormentors, he was suddenly attacked by a massed force of Yamadutas. They assailed Ravana with spears, iron bars, steel clubs, pikes, javelins, and maces. They rose up and began demolishing the seats, daises, pillars, and houses on the Pushpaka. But the indestructible chariot was immediately recreated by the power of Brahma, by whom it had first been fashioned. Ravana's Rakshasa forces fought back against the Yamadutas. Millions upon millions of servants of Yamaraj advanced in great waves. They rained down an unlimited number of arrows and other fierce weapons upon Ravana and his followers. The Rakshasas engaged with the Yamadutas, sending up their terrible war cries. The clash of weapons and the shouts of the warriors sounded like the roaring ocean tossed by a storm. Battle scenes are always like very graphic. And I've learned that young boys really like it. It's their favorite, consistently. There are probably some exceptions, but. Leaving the other Rakshasas, the Yamadutas concentrated upon Ravana. Covered all over with their arrows and bleeding profusely, the demon king appeared like a great mountain giving forth streams of red lava. Using his knowledge of mystic weapons, the Rakshasa returned the volleys of arrows, spears, maces, rocks, and huge trees. This fearful and deadly shower fell upon the forces of Yamaraj, who stood in front of Ravana. By whirling their maces and lances, the Yamadutas repelled all of Ravana's missiles and surrounded him in thousands. They appeared like a mass of carnivorous ants around a large black beetle. Ravana became completely covered by darts and lances, piercing every part of his body. He roared in anger and pain, quickly rising upward from out of the midst of his assailants. Descending to the ground, he held his bow and placed upon it a blazing arrow. The demon invoked the power of Shiva, imbuing the arrow with the divine force of that immortal god. As the weapon was released, a sheet of fire raced across the ground, consuming the Yamaraj's forces. Enormous orange and white flames leaped out in all directions, burning the Yamaduta's bodies to ashes. The ground itself became molten, and the forces of Yamaraj fell back in a confused mass. We just have another 3 pages, 2.5. In the flames' wake came innumerable ghostly followers of Shiva. filling the earth and sky with their terrible forms. They rushed about the battlefield, striking fear into the Yamaduta's heart. Weapon, waves of fearsome carnivorous beasts sprang up from the ground, howling horribly and tearing at the Yamadutas. Ravana sent up a victory cry, making the ground shake. Hearing that shout, Yamaraj, seated in his palace, could understand that Ravana was overpowering his forces. He ordered his chariot to be fetched and quickly mounted it. Yamaraj stood in his stupendous chariot with a lance and mace in his hands. Angered, the great god burned with a glaring radiance. By his side stood his personified form of Kala Danda. Danda means rod, right? Kala means time. The infallible rod of death. His body, a brilliant black, and his eyes blazing like two red fires. On the other side of Yamaraj stood the very time spirit himself, the destroyer of all the worlds, fearful in appearance. Standing together, those three deities could not be countenanced. So death on one side, time on the other side, and Yamaraj in the middle. Here we come. On all four sides of the chariot, which looked like a dark mountain, hung the frightful nooses of capital D, death. Drawn by 1,000 red and black steeds, shining with a bright luster, and having 1,000 great wheels, the celestial chariot advanced with noise. Seeing that god moving off in anger, all the denizens of heaven trembled. In an instant, Yamaraj's chariot arrived at the spot where Ravana still roaring, was still roaring. Where Ravana stood roaring. Ravana's followers immediately fled in all directions upon seeing that awful chariot. Some of them fell unconscious on the spot, but Ravana himself was not afraid. Seeing his awful adversary, he felt overjoyed, anticipating the fight. The demon stood firm as Yamaraj roared past him. Many blazing javelins of fire piercing the sun, through the blood scorching his body. Ravana raced to the foe to conquer Yamaraj's risen forces. He fired thousands of the demon countless barbed lances which struck him violently on the breast. Stunned by those irresistible weapons, Ravana fell unconscious to the ground. Yamaraj, observing the rules of fair combat, did not further attack his overpowered enemy. After some time, Ravana came back to his senses and saw Yamaraj still stationed before him. He contemplated his next move. This was indeed a formidable opponent. Rarely was the demon extended in a fight. Ravana rallied himself and stretched his bow to full length, releasing celestial arrows which filled the sky. They fell upon Yamaraj like fiery serpents. Being assailed by those arrows, bleeding profusely, Yamaraj roared in anger. As he opened his mouth, fire covered by billows of smoke that issued forth. The whole region was brilliantly illuminated by that fire, as if the sun itself had risen in that ever-dark place. Witnessing the astonishing battle between Yamaraj and the Rakshasa, the gods assembled above them. They feared that the dissolution of all the world was imminent. Yamaraj's anger would surely annihilate the entire universe. Ravana continuously sent his furious weapons towards the three gods, death personified. None of the past, no matter how powerful, have been able to overcome me. Every god, rishi, demon has succumbed to my power. Indeed, all created beings must surely submit to me. There is no doubt about this. Therefore, you need not bother yourself with this wretch any longer. Lead me to him. Yamaraj had become infuriated by Ravana's insolence. He felt insulted, and he told Death to stand back, for he personally would destroy the demon. The god lifted up his mace and gazed upon Ravana. As it was raised, that mace threw off a halo of blazing fire. Yamaraj held it in his hand like the globe of the sun, and he fixed his red eyes on the demon. Just as he was about to release the mace to destroy Ravana, Brahma appeared before him. He was seen and heard only by Yamaraj as he spoke to the angry god. "Oh, immeasurably powerful one, this Rakshasa is not to be killed by you at any time. Indeed, I have conferred upon it a boon that he cannot be slain by a human. This cannot be falsified, slain except by human. This cannot be falsified, lest the order of the universe be cast into chaos. Therefore, hold back your mace. Ravana is not yet destined to die. If you release your infallible mace upon this demon, it will result in the death of all other created beings." Long ago, Ravana had pleased Brahma by performing difficult austerities, and had won from the god a boon. Brahma had granted Ravana immunity from all beings except for humans and animals, whom Ravana utterly disregarded. Hearing that command of Brahma, the chief of the gods, Yamaraj lowered his mace. Realizing that nothing could be accomplished by him in that battle, he then and there disappeared from Ravana's sight. When he saw Yamaraj depart, the Rakshasa considered himself victorious and roared in joy. Now he was surely the most powerful being in the universe. What was there left to prove? Even the great Lord of Death had to run away from him. Vertical dimension of the universe, because Yamaraj is in the bottom of the universe and the north is in the middle region of the universe. There's description in the fifth canto of the Bhagavatam that the realm of the Rakshasas is in the Bhuvarga No, but the where he went in the lower region, that's the Daityas. I mean, it's the demarcation is not um, super clear, at least for me, at least not yet. But the Daityas, they can be in the earthly realm, but they also have their main residences in the lower regions. So this is this narration of Ravana's exploits comes in one of the later sections of Valmiki Ramayana, Uttarakanda, and it's being narrated by Valmiki to Ram, or by others, etc. But it's this history of what Ravana's exploits and curses that he received. There's others besides the ones mentioned, but the primary ones are mentioned. Before he even had his encounter with Ramchandra, or had his encounter with Sita, or Sita, Ram had his encounter with Kara and Dushan, etc. The stage was set already for his being destroyed. See if we can remember all the curses, not necessarily chronologically as they happened. One of the curses, who can say? Quiz question. Vedavati, that was the first one. That she would come in her next life and she would be the one to destroy him. Nandi. What was Nandi's curse? Huh? Monkey army will destroy him. So Nandi, Vedavati,
Anaranya.
Anaranya. Anaranya was the king of the Sun dynasty, or Ikshvaku dynasty. So his curse was one descendant in this dynasty will destroy you in battle, and your whole dynasty. That's Anaranya. So Nandi, Anaranya,
Nalakubera.
Vedavati, Nalakubera's wife Rampa. Nalakubera's curse: if you ever touch another woman to violate her, you will immediately die. There were others, but that's enough. Keep him busy. But obviously, a terrible demoniac person, and invincibly powerful, and thus the demigods wanted Vishnu. Brahma particularly appealed to Vishnu, help. And he did. Really easy to sit and listen to Ramayana, isn't it? It's very absorbing. Any discussion?
One question, Guru Maharaj. Very intrigued. Thank you for the wonderful class.
Just reading. It's going to keep going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was intrigued by there were 4 curses in total, at least so far that we have seen, and none of them he took seriously, but he only took Nalakubera's or Ramba's things seriously. I was just wondering, is it because they were beings on par with him and the other beings were not, like, just humans? I mean, I didn't understand like why he would take it so seriously and not the others.
Well, one could say one of the reasons is it's part of the Leela, and another could be what you said, because he was from the heavenly region. didn't seem to care about anybody, but um, all that it did was it checked his further violating women just in case. So that doesn't answer your question, other than it didn't stop him. He was just being more careful, because the others weren't saying, you know, a puny human, Anaranya's dynasty, they'll meet the same. So, what's there to heed? Puny human, they'll meet the same destiny as he did. Okay? It's not conclusive, but it's just directional a little bit. Something else? Comment or? Yeah.
Nothing from the internet, Maharaj. So anybody?
Yeah, let's just do them in the future. We'll go around the room because it gives time for people who are remote to send something in.
Sure, Maharaj.
Okay.
Hare.
Can we do this? Do we have a sanitizing cloth, and we can just wipe? Turn the speaker off. Turn the microphone off, and just wipe the handle and the top. This is our protocol for little gatherings like this. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. And it's wonderful when you are reading. It's even more nectarian to listen Ramayana. So Maharaj, the question is like Anaranya cursed Ravana. Actually, this is like one king can attack another king, and why Anaranya have to curse?
Why which?
Anaranya have to curse.
He didn't have to.
Yeah.
So why did he? The explanation of why he did is explained.
Oh, okay.
He should be responsible for his heinous activities. He's a king.
Mm-hmm.
He should be responsible for his heinous activities. And he had no fighting strength left, so this is the one thing he had.
Oh, okay. Okay, got it, Maharaj. And Maharaj, one more question, other than this Ramayana, it's a generic. When I ask them to chant, right, kids are saying it's boring, like you need to repeat the same mantra again and again. So what I need to say, Maharaj, for them?
Depends on your kids.
Yeah.
Different personalities, different things to say. It really depends on the personality. I guess be patient. Don't push. Ask them if they like music, and then engage them in mantra chanting with music. Engage with them in ways that they're happy to engage with.
Okay.
You can invite them to with kirtan and after kirtan. Would you like to chant for 5 minutes together with me? We sit together. So do it as like a family activity. Because I'm repeating that because when it is forced, then later it makes a really sour impression. Another could be just with other young people chanting because the other young people are chanting, and there's some social interaction that helps them do.
Okay.
It depends on the children.
Yeah, and interestingly, like interested in reading Bhagavatam and all, but not for chanting.
But I understand that it's common. What you're saying is not uncommon.
Oh.
It's common. So, there's reasons why. Part of the reason why is the media and the technology media that young people are exposed to. It doesn't that hold their attention. Thus, this other doesn't hold their attention.
Yeah.
So, engage in wholesome things together, the reading and discussing and hearing and do those things that are enjoyable together.
Yeah.
And then, whenever there's opportunity, encourage. I mean, another depends on the child. The increased tendency of depression and other, any kids in school that have depression problems, or they're sad type of people or something like. It's like, here's some statistics. It's a growing thing, and the age group is younger age group more and more than ever before. And here's something that's just studies have found. So you find it boring, and I find it, it's going to be, it's helpful.
Sure, Maharaj. Yeah.
And it depends on the child.
Yeah.
Their nature, what holds their interest, what moves them from point A to point B.
Oh, yes, Maharaj. Yeah. Thank you, Maharaj.
Parenting in our modern day is a major challenge. Yeah, just use a used one. Use a used one. Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, there is no questions online, but I would like to know what the book, a particular Ramayana version which we are reading.
It's published by Torchlight Publication, Torchlight Publishers, and the author is Krishna Dharma Das. Krishna Dharma Das.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
That's it. Okay. Okay, we're done for the evening. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada Ki.